all Canadian families, we are on the Titanic. The iceberg hasn't hit yet, so we're not sinking. If we don't shift course, that iceberg is coming for us.
I'm not planning on leaving. I'm fighting. We want to make this country incredibly great.
We begin to see that it really isn't about diversity. It is about punishing the people who perform beyond the mean.
For people who don't care, where do you see Canada going?
Oh, it's catastrophic. It is that bad.
What is the carbon tax doing to lower carbon emissions?
Exactly.
I love this country. I was born in this country. I believe in what this country stands for. I believe in its people. I believe as a place opportunity for all to come and live, but the path that we're on is not working. And we are not going to be what we're supposed to be if we continue along this path.
Yeah. You know, I want to say we are so glad that you guys are watching and tuning in and allowing us to wrestle with these concepts by sharing it, liking it, and commenting it. But 83%, almost 85% of you guys don't subscribe. And I want you to take a moment right now and subscribe. When you subscribe, it allows us to not only build this channel, but continue to go into new algorithms, new levels, so that we can reach more people and make this country what it can become. So make sure to subscribe. Do it right now. Hit that bell notification, and that way you'll be notified. We also do live. And you can join us for the lives. We do giveaways sometimes, and we do all sorts of live interactions. So we want you to join us for those. Make sure to subscribe. Citizens, welcome. As you can tell, we are joined by a good friend of ours, Mr. David Leis. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Excellent. Great to be here.
Awesome.
I feel like he doesn't need introduction
No, he
anymore
doesn't.
because he's now crossed the threshold.
Yeah, he's done enough. He's right
Official
here with
friend
us.
of the show. Our audience should
It's
know.
good. It's good.
Thank
Your
you.
mic's a bit far away.
I'll bring it closer.
There you go. Clarity. And I thought I would adjust this.
Yeah, go for it. Are we closer?
I think so, because we might be a part of the United States soon. So I don't know how to.
So what does that mean? Is that we should
I
put
don't
the
know.
iceberg on the Titanic?
Yeah, or maybe the iceberg moves. I don't know. We'll see.
So David, I think you know this analogy. We constantly adjust the Titanic based on how good our show is and what happened this last
Very
week in
good.
Canada.
What's happening in Canada? Yeah.
Wow.
For those of you,
Determines the visual aid.
for those of you who might not be familiar with Mr. Leis, our friend, he is president is the official title, right?
Yes, sir.
President
Yes.
of the Frontier Center for Public Policy, a great think tank in our country, which I would highly recommend. First off, go visit their website, go check out their socials, watch David Leis's show, Leaders on the Frontier.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything you want to know about issues in Canada.
Yeah.
They probably have 1,000-page historical and active view on. I'm just saying that they put a lot of effort with all of their people that are involved, and they're a great resource. So anyways, happy to have you again.
Always.
Wonderful to be here, guys.
Well, should we continue on from last week?
Yep.
Because Trump has been trolling Canadians in Canada about becoming the 51st state. We touched last week a lot on the 25% tariff threat for Canada and Mexico. We kind of gave our initial thoughts on that. And I think there's been a lot more information that has revealed itself. It's been evolving. But I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is it's kind of being talked about in two different lights. There's kind of the playful, ridiculous sense of it. Then all of a sudden, Justin Trudeau goes down to Prime Minister Trudeau goes down to Mar-a-Lago, and there was some exchange of words back and forth about the position of it. And then, but when you actually were the one that showed this to me, was the seriousness of this and the fact that this has been going on for much longer than any of this has been talked about. It's apparently been an issue for, correct me if I'm wrong, 40, 50 years. Is that correct? Going back into the 70s?
I think
60s?
doing a deep, like if you're doing a deep cuts, deep dive of this, there's a lot more than meets the eye, which I actually learned through your show, David, with a great guest that you had on. So there is a lot of history behind this, and Trump isn't necessarily being playful. There's some real background that's behind what he's stating. It's kind of that playful way of saying, get your crap together, guys, or there's going to be pain, essentially.
And it's easy to miss it with Trump because Trumpifies everything. You know what I mean? He kind of just does things kind of jokingly playful, sweeping terms. But when you actually dig deep on this one, you realize it's actually quite a large issue. And over lunch upstairs, we were just discussing a few of the issues with actually over in the BC border area into the United States, which I'd love to explore because what you were sharing is wild.
Well, that's the deep dive. But quick
Yes.
question for you, David. Initially, we gave our thoughts last week, but 25% tariffs, do you think that's a serious threat? And if so, how much does that impact Canadians?
The short answer, I think it's a great threat for our country in terms of our economic security. I think it's also, frankly, a threat for the United States as well, in the sense that our economies are highly integrated. I mean, we have some $2 billion plus of trade every day.
Yeah.
And the degree of integration between our two economies is really stunning. It's energy, it's manufacturing, it's soup to nuts.
Yeah.
But there's always, it would be incredibly disruptive, and it would, I think, do damage to both countries. But it would be a disaster, certainly for this country, I believe.
Yeah.
So Trump would be willing to put his country through pain, you think, with that? Or is this, like, I'm sure he's expecting not to follow through with it. It's kind of that heavy-handed approach or coming over the top to get another solution that he's looking for. But do you think he'd actually follow through with that 25%? Because that would be disastrous for us.
We should take a loony bet
Okay.
on what's going to happen on January 20th. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think that, and that's the brilliance of the statement, is it creates uncertainty to create a chain reaction of change, because the issues aren't just simply trade related.
Okay.
They're security related. And bear with me the pun, but security always trumps trade. This is something we learned post 9/11 years ago, is that if there's very real security issues, a nation has no choice, a leadership, to protect its citizens.
Yeah.
In most cases, most rational decision makers. So security does trump trade. And I think that's what this is. This message is a wake-up call to our country, among others, including Mexico, to say, get your act together on definitely security issues. And there's some very, very serious ones that I think most Canadians are just clueless about, to put it bluntly.
I was one of them, I think, until the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, me too.
Like, because one of the statements I made last week, which I might have to crawl back a little bit, is I took a little exception to the fact that Trump would lump in Canada the same place as Mexico when it comes to border issue, because all you see from media is an open border from Mexico, which is allowing all sorts of people from different places through. It's just like open the floodgates. It has been for the last year or so. Canada, you don't really get that same picture, but the more I've been diving into it, you realize it might not be the same numbers, but it's probably just as potentially grave an issue, and maybe even more so depending on the angle you look at it when it comes to intelligence and national security. So we can dive into that.
No, and I'm with you, David. I almost feel offended to be lumped in with the border issues with Mexico, where the United States has facilitated, frankly, an open border there during the Biden years. It's outrageous. But it all depends on an apple versus apple comparison. What are the issues that are in Canada? And I think that I don't still think they're quite of the magnitude as Mexico. But, my friend, a guest, was an intelligence, he is an intelligence analyst, would say that Canada is definitely equal, if not even more so. So for me, that was a revelation as well. I do know this, that Canada is a significant hub, if not a super hub, for money laundering, fentanyl production.
Yeah.
And I think so part of the thing that you don't realize, and you would have seen this maybe during the election, is a lot of outrage being expressed about the hundreds of thousands of people dying in the United States every year because of fentanyl poisoning and other drug-related deaths. This is a serious five-alarm crisis across the United States and also in Canada to some degree. I mean, this is incredible, the amount of people dying in this country every year. It's a record number.
I watched someone 10 days ago in Winnipeg.
You did.
No.
Yeah, I was in Winnipeg, and Winnipeg is turning into a pretty sad picture.
It is.
When you get downtown and you look at the core, it's not safe to walk in a lot of places. And this is where I grew up. Like, I know these streets well.
Yes.
And so I was driving in the Exchange District, and as I was doing that, there was like a small group of people by the museum there, or the theater. And as I was turning, I had my eyes set on one guy and I could see he wasn't well. Something was happening. He was kind of either having a seizure of some kind, but I've seen, oddly enough, I've seen about 6 or 7 seizures in front of me. And I could tell it wasn't a seizure from my car. And so I stopped. I drove up on the curb because it looked like he needed help. And then he full collapsed and then just either had passed out or was... So I'm about to get out of my car. I roll down my window to the guy. I yell at him. I said, "What's wrong with that guy? He's going this." And the guy yells, "He's having on meth." And right as I said, "I'm calling 911," I grab my phone. I'm calling on it on the screen. The lady yells into my car, "I got Narcan." And she just with Narcan right there. And so I'm staring at him. I'm waiting to hit enter for the 911 to see if the Narcan works. And immediately it worked. And he came right back to. And they saved his life right there. But I just walked away from that feeling so heavy. I was like, what is going on? What is going on?
But Jeremy, that story is a powerful illustration of how in Canada to some degree, but definitely in the United States, everybody knows somebody directly or indirectly who's overdosed.
Wow.
And this is a national crisis, and they're not going to sit idly by as Canada is the backyard door into the United States for everything.
Yeah.
And this is the dirty secret that's been going on for too long. Our national police force and leaders have been articulating report after report about the need to get on this. We only inspect less than 2% of our containers, the millions that come into this country through Halifax to Vancouver. Vancouver is the second largest port on the West Coast. How is that possible? And this isn't just everything and anything that's coming into play in terms of drugs, people, but also technology. We're on the top of the list in terms of a producer of encrypted technology for the criminal underworld in right now. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The main software suppliers are Canadian that are giving encrypted code to all kinds of criminal cartels. And it's because there's so many of them are based in the Lower Mainland. It's ridiculous. In other parts of the country as well. So, we've really got to pay attention to this.
To give you a picture, you said, I want to hit on that, how large the Vancouver port is, and I have a question why after, but less than 2% are inspected. So that leaves ample opportunity. I just looked it up here. There's about 10,000 containers that pass through the port of Vancouver every day.
Right.
So if you got 2%, that's less than 200 out of 10,000 containers that are inspected. So that just seems like it's the best odds in the world to be able to pass things through as a major port, right? Okay, so you mentioned a while ago, you said, what are the issues? You started hitting on fentanyl, you touched on money laundering a little bit. Our border security, we're leaking into, just to keep you guys up to speed, into probably security and intelligence that U.S. is seeing issues creeping into their country because Canada maybe hasn't paid attention to its border. Why do we have these issues over our border? That's a big question. Is that something that has just happened over the last 9 years with the Liberal government, or is this expand further past with the Harper government and other governments? Have we just not paid that much attention?
Okay.
Have we taken it for granted in terms of not having security? Or is it too tall of a task to actually be able to?
Okay, so it's multifaceted. I think there's a lot of very good books on this. I think The Mosaic Effect is a fantastic book. I'd recommend The Mosaic Effect. And basically, it's multifaceted. It's been going on for decades. One of the things, though, it's gone on steroids the last 10 years, I would argue. So let's just look at the issue. It's human trafficking. It's a record number of immigrants coming into this country. To what degree we're actually vetting those people is clearly a major question of concern, especially if we look at the number of known terrorists that have been apprehended at the Canadian border, period.
Yep.
You also have the issue of fentanyl production. We saw just a few weeks ago, and I've cited this before, and I've seen the original document, the sighting of fentanyl production. We've got super labs all across this country producing fentanyl, all the ingredients, the precursors are coming in this country. This is a perfect production zone because no one's really bothering you. There's no consequences. We also have, I believe, a larger pattern of the first pattern is you've got the politicization of policing leadership. And I think we saw this in spades with the heads of the RCMP and how they carried themselves off very differently, I think, from other heads of other police forces, such as the Ontario Provincial Police during the convoy.
Yeah.
So you had the assertion by some parties that this is a so-called national emergency, when in fact that testimony and sworn testimony, we had statements saying by, I believe, very credible intelligence officials, including the OPP, who said this was not a national security issue. There were no violent threats. I mean, they called it out. But time after time, it seems like the RCMP is in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's because of politicization, and that's wrong. The other pattern that you have is the influence of the Communist Party of China through our institutions at the political class at the highest level. Every prime minister has had their challenges. And I think if you read a very famous report, it's been classified. It's called the Sidewinder Report. It's all in there. And people are not listening at the leadership level. And this is why we've had an inquiry around foreign interference, because it is real.
Yeah.
And even then you can argue, are they really getting to the bottom of it, or is it a whitewash?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to overwhelm you, but we've got a lot of stuff to do in this country to get our act together, because if we don't, then our economy is at risk. This is the issue. You can't separate policy issues like the economy from security.
Yeah.
The Sidewinder report, which you're referring to, is that easily accessible?
No.
I just chat GPT'd it.
Yeah, me too.
Project Sidewinder is a 1997 joint study by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the RCMP. It investigated threats to Canada's national security from alleged collaboration between Chinese intelligence services and organized crime groups, particularly triads, in infiltrating Canadian institutions and businesses.
Bingo.
So so just for you guys who are maybe listening or maybe just being aware of this for the first time, this is real spy stuff.
Look at the next paragraph.
What does it say?
The report faced significant controversy. It was reportedly suppressed with orders to destroy all copies and related materials, leading to tensions between CSIS and the RCMP. The RCMP accused CSIS of altering the report in a way to undermine its integrity, while CSIS maintained the changes were due to factual disagreements. What is going on?
I want to get side question. You just sparked something. Is CSIS compromised at all a little bit in the sense of they're under a certain ministry of government, right? It's the ministry of, do you remember which one it is? Because you have CBSA, Canadian Border Security. You've got CSIS, and there's a third one, RCMP, isn't it?
Yeah. Keep in mind they're listening.
Well,
no, not our studio. We're locked down. We got this.
Yeah. So I don't want to wade into those areas specifically.
Okay.
But what I do know is that these are very important organizations to protect our security and work together.
Yes.
And there's been report after report. Sidewinder is not the only one.
Okay.
There's been a whole host of them. And they have been ignored. They have been suppressed.
But why?
Crazy.
Because the politicians don't want to hear about it.
Politically.
And they may be compromised. And these are facts. So read the book, The Mosaic Effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
So that will
Amazon
give you,
that right now, everybody.
Yeah, you
get
look
on
at
there
that.
and
No,
Amazon
because these facts matter. And if you look at original documents, I mean, you have to take those things seriously. Now, the other thing you can't underestimate is that the amount of things that we rely on with these organizations that have been compromised because of a major scandal going back a few years ago. There was a senior director of security intelligence that was found out to be compromised fully. And this was a huge revelation. And he had the keys to security across
Like a full-on
the board.
spy, you're saying?
Yes, he's like so years ago in the United Kingdom,
Yeah.
there's a very famous double agent named Kim Philby.
Yes. Familiar.
So Kim Philby was in effect the supervisor of security for MI5. And he was actually given the responsibility at one point to investigate the compromise of what they thought were a number of spies within MI5.
And he was in fact a double agent himself?
And he was the guy. So he was told to
I need to look
investigate
into
it.
this stuff.
And of course he said, no, there's been no compromises.
It's all good.
Because he was the man.
That's you got to write a movie
So
on
this is the guy. We had our Kim Philby in Canada, and he had the keys to the Five Eyes program. The Five Eyes program being the interoperable spy and intelligence sharing network between the United States, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada.
The Five Eyes, right?
So we don't, the Americans at this point, and I'm going on a little bit of a limb, but I don't think so based on people I know within the system, have said they know more about our issues of compromised security than we do. Now, this kind of makes sense because if we've been constantly politicizing at a senior level, right, those positions, and we've been cutting back on military-related issues that tied directly to intelligence capability, you got a problem. Like look at our Canadian Border Security Service. It's not even deputized. Like this is in contrast to the U.S. system, where those guys are deputized to do full-on arrests like police officers.
Yeah.
No, you can't have
It's a crazy difference.
They can't be like restaurant servers. They've got to be totally deputized.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? And
They have to pose a threat to actual criminal
I think
activity
so.
in the moment.
Isn't that-
Otherwise,
for sure.
it's like when you see a security guy walking at the mall. It's like
Yeah.
you're not going to deter me. You can't do anything to me.
Exactly.
They're instructed that all they can do is watch and call. That's not a real.
No, and there's another side to this that is almost embarrassing, and it kind of crosses the boundaries of all these things between the economy and criminal syndicates. If you look at the regulatory regime for, and I understand if you don't particularly like these products, but alcohol, tobacco, it's like the Wild West. There's, what is it? About half of the tobacco in Canada is illicit. So the regulatory regime isn't working. So what's the problem? Because that hurts people. Because if you have all this illicit trading, what's going to happen there? It's like flies to sugar for criminal cartels,
of course,
taking over this activity. And this has been well documented.
Yeah.
But the politicians are all twiddling their thumbs as people get hurt, as citizens get nailed, and they don't even know what's hit them because they don't realize how much money's at stake. This is worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yes. Well, and now just to get us back on track, this is really important to talk through. If you're just tuning in now, we are talking about why Trump is posing a threat on the 25% tariffs. It's not just this lighthearted thing. We're talking about national security potential issues that the U.S. views, and Trump wants us to get our act in order, just like Mexico, to secure up the United States. And obviously, as a massive partner to us, there's a lot at stake.
Exactly.
With that.
Yeah. So this is kind of like the paradox of Canadian politics, is that for years now, we drink in the bathwater of the legacy media, and they all talk simplistically about Donald Trump as being orange man bad.
Yeah.
And I get it. You may not like his Queen's accent. Okay, so be it. But you got to pay attention to what's really being said so you don't miss the plot.
Yeah.
And what we're missing here is some people think, well, it's just kind of like a negotiation style, and he's just being an ignoramus or something. No, there's a larger message and complexity of issue, and our Canadian smugness, we may totally miss the message.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you so Prime Minister Trudeau has done some tending to. We went down the Mar-a-Lago, which you talked about. I know he's been trying to talk with some provincial leaders across our country about coming. There's not really a response, but it sounds like he's keen to do some of the things. Have we heard anything from because there obviously is an election looming. No matter, it's guaranteed less than a year. It could be any moment. Has Pierre Poilievre, as the guy that Trudeau will be running against and looks like would walk away with a victory, has he said anything about this, what he would do practically, or is he still hitting obviously all the issues that's caused by Trudeau? Have you heard anything about that?
I have. I'm just trying to reflect on the full content of it, but I think it's really centered on the fact that we need to stand up for Canada and what are we going to do to get our house in order. So I think what's going on is a lot of optics and kind of like a kabuki theater, so to speak. Like, why would you hop on the plane to go to Mar-a-Lago other than to kiss some guy's ring?
Totally.
I would say, no, let's meet over Zoom and let's respectfully get out understanding what are the issues so we can develop a plan that will actually create a win-win and take that seriously. I think too much of it is about the optics of somehow being seen to be a leader rather than saying, no, leadership is by example. And, I don't know. I'm maybe, am I being a little bit cynical on that? But to me, this is an opportunity to respond aggressively on behalf of the Canadian nation and get our house in order. Mm-hmm. But this is from, frankly, a set of leaders that have frittered away some 10 years to weaken this country on every front imaginable, on economic policy to everything else, and including security.
And when we possibly are being called to the table by one of the biggest threats we have faced in the last several decades, we are at one of our most vulnerable points.
We really are.
Right, which is interesting to, like, you don't want to be in a position of weakness when you have to negotiate.
Which I just thought was such an ignorant thing to say to Trump, was if these tariffs are imposed on us, it would, what was the word he said? It would
cripple us economically or something like that.
The Canadian economy, something along those lines. What that tells me is there was no preparation into this conversation. There was no foresight into negotiations. You're bringing to the table that you're going to hurt me if you do this. That's what you brought. Like I'm no master of negotiations, but I love negotiations. I love reading on it, studying on it, human behavior, how to win, how to lose, how to figure out what they need, make it, and then figure out how to solve that problem for them. From the world level, to go to someone who's president-elect of the greatest, most powerful country in the world, and you go up to him and say, if you do this, you're going to hurt us. That's why he made such a powerful joke back, saying, well, then, if the only way you guys can win is by hurting us, then maybe you should become the 51st state. I don't think he's actually joking. Like he's obviously, we're not at the point where I think he's going to do that, but there's probably a point where that is unnecessary down the road. We're not there. I don't think we're anywhere close, but I'm just shocked at the lack of preparation to bring that sentence to Trump in Mar-a-Lago. It seems ignorant.
You guys ready for this?
I don't know.
Trudeau should have read Trump's book,
The Art of the Deal.
That's right. Well, if
he should have, though. You honestly, though, you should go as prepared as you can possibly imagine.
That's funny.
And yeah, to me, like anytime I go to any meeting of any kind with any person, and I do this even with David or with you, I will figure out, okay, what shows have you shot recently? What have you done? Who'd you talk to? Who'd you meet with? What's happening in David's world? And I'll just think of everything so that I walk into your world and I can speak to your world and talk about it and figure out what you're thinking and doing.
What's his weakness? What pressure points can I push?
But never mind when you're coming with your tail between your legs, with not really all that much to offer to the table for a negotiation.
Okay, but that's a good point, though. What do we have to offer? Like, in this negotiation we're at, what responses can we possibly do aside from we're going to clean up our crap?
I think we have everything to offer as a country that could say, we are your number one. We want to be a continental partner, not only economically from soup to nuts. We want to be your full partner in terms of security. So this continent, this incredible place called North America, is the best in the world. And speaking with some of Trump's advisors, that's their vision. That's what they want to pursue. Okay. So you should beat them to it and say, we actually see our bigger vision here. This is a bigger deal than you can imagine.
Great.
Now that would be music to, to Donald Trump. I think it would be music to his ears, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So to me, it just seemed like you're, flying down to Palm Beach there and kissing the ring, and you're coming across like a junior partner instead of saying, well, how do we, from a policy perspective, cast a game-changing vision? In this world where Canadians are struggling with affordability, Canadians are struggling with their declining standard of living. We got a massive productivity problem level here on our ninth quarter where we've seen a decrease. We've got money flowing out of the country by the hundreds of billions of dollars going to invest elsewhere. This is like one of your best opportunities to totally flip that, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
That's a great response.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we touched around the national security, guys, for citizens listening, look into that, because that's probably not something we pay attention to normally or even think of. We probably just assume We're secure,
That's it.
and we don't realize that how much the economic impact national security actually has on a country, especially when it comes to things like this. But Trump took that with, you're talking about Trudeau's maybe not the greatest response, and started trolling. Well, his response back was, well, maybe you guys should become the 51st state of the United States. And it's definitely been in past presidents' purview to expand territory and do that.
Do we? I want to get that photo ready of his Instagram. Did you see it?
Okay, Brick,
it's
which one?
so funny. I can't. I laughed out loud. Tamara was the one that showed it to me.
Did you see the video that's being made? They were on the plane. Trump was with a couple guys on his plane. A couple guys said, look what someone generated. And Trump looks and starts laughing. And he goes, put that up on my site right now.
A sign outside.
I gotcha.
It was fire. It was.
Will you put it up on my side?
You want to do it?
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, let me get the rally
No,
out.
do it now.
Yeah?
Do it. Get it up.
Put it up.
that's the
are you
one I'm
serious?
talking
And he
about.
goes, yeah, put it up. That's funny. It wasn't even his idea. Someone else did
It's
it.
so funny.
It's him standing on a mountain with a Canadian flag
right here,
overlooking. You got it? Yeah. Look at that.
It's so.
I love that he climbed that mountain in his suit and his dress shoes.
Look at his text. All he said was, "Oh Canada!" exclamation mark. Which is the leaving such a void of question, right? You're just going, what does this mean? Why are you? What do you mean? Oh Canada! Why are you starting off like?
It's ambiguous.
Yeah, what are
again,
you
right?
doing? Like,
So what does "O Canada" mean, guys? What does it mean?
He's trolling.
No, I don't know, Dave. I'm ashamed to say
my
it.
thought is that he's letting your imagination fill in all the voids for that.
Yeah,
If you're not suffice, I'll be suffice for you. Is what I take from that.
Well, I've been on our YouTube comments. Hey, right now, comment. Let us know whether you want to be part of the United States or you think Canada should remain strong. I've been going at some people in the comments lately because I've seen some people say, to my surprise, it's nice seeing people say I don't want it, but there's been some people saying I would prefer it. I'd want this. I'd want that, and I've kind of been coming back at them because I'm obviously not. I'm not for that.
But when they're for it, though, the thing that I try to always break down, why are they for it? Because they're for winning. They're for. I don't want to say the.
But that's short-sighted though, and it's lazy.
Yes, I know. But when you're sitting in a dumpster watching someone who's in a home eating a warm meal,
You're in a dumpster fire and you see another dumpster that's not on fire. I want to go
quite
there.
on fire, but it's a little bit better than your situation. It's just the grass looks greener, I think, sometimes. And that causes you to think that way.
But that's, I think, part of our goal in the show too is life is going to have many stages where the grass looks greener
and to
elsewhere.
abandon does not mean.
But that means, what do we have to do? Do we put our boots on? Do we have to go to work? What do we do to actually bring the vision of what we want, we see elsewhere, bring it in our own backyard? Like, we're going to be faced with that in our own personal lives, our entire lives.
Yeah.
And how you respond says more about you than being able to jump ship. So
no, I think you're right. And it's interesting you put it in those terms, because I think this is a challenging moment for our country as the United States gets into a different cycle, I think, of, frankly, economic, but also political renewal. Because we are currently, as a country, we've made some disastrous political policy decisions where our standard of living is declining. Let's just take the province of Ontario. The average family income there is some $20,000 less than the state of Alabama.
wow.
This is a massive differential.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue to widen. And there's reasons why. It's not a mystery. We've been talking about this for years. And so which path are we going to take? Are we going to take one of steady decline, or are we going to join hands with the United States and work aggressively to rebuild and renew this country? That's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the last 10 or 15 minutes we have, can the United States, aside from military conquest, can it actually incorporate Canada if Trudeau wanted to? It might be a crazy question, but is that even possible? What does that look like?
I don't know how it would be possible in the immediate. I think, having said that, political movements can kind of accomplish anything ultimately. Think of it. Years ago, there was a series of incredible British colonies that decided we're going to come together and we're going to make a union. And the founders had incredible speeches about this.
Yes.
And they founded the country under Sir John A. Macdonald, our incredible prime minister who knew how to play 3D chess.
Yes.
And he decided that they could create a better better country, and they could do it in this part of North America, and they did. It's we have an incredible country.
Yes, I want to hit on that point because I think more Canadians. I love the pride that Americans have for their history. Canada is steeped in tremendous history.
It is
like the coming together of our forefathers, and even going back to the 1600s. Even Lord Conrad Black has a great book, The Forgotten History of Canada. Right. And obviously he's a great writer and historian. And I'd recommend people to read that, just because if you are lacking Canadian pride, you got to educate yourself on where we've come from and the challenges we've gone through. You look at the War of 1812, you look at really interesting pieces of our history. It's just, I think it'll help bolster Canadian pride.
I'm with you. In fact, and we'd be better to remember that history now more than ever. That whole vision for the founding of this nation, where, regardless of where you came from, whatever your race, you could be Canadian, and you could do so in freedom and really create an enormous prosperity and opportunity. So that's what Canada's about. I think we've got to stick together. But I tell you, this challenge can be an opportunity to renew our country. Yeah.
Well, there's the reason I asked you if it's even possible, because there's obviously a growing movement in Alberta, in the West, about this idea of Wexit, right? The Western exit of Canada. You talk about, there's a guy that's up north in Alberta. His name's Marty Up North. Have you seen him? That's his ex name. Yeah. He's an interesting dude, and smart guy. And he's got some great, maybe we have him on one time, get him down to Calgary. But he is putting together, he does a lot of deep dives into serious topics, and I learned quite a bit from him, actually. But he put together the Yukon, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and I think northern BC, and calculated what our GDP would be if we actually were separate from Canada in terms of what we can produce. And it was interesting, the stuff he was coming on, because we'd be a part of the G25. We'd already be in the top 25 countries in the world in terms of what you can produce and what you can do. So I'm just saying, there is growing sentiment of leaving Canada because of maybe people are obviously upset and different things that's happened in the last 10 years. So that's why I wanted to ask the question. Is that actually possible? I know there's a lot of loopholes, a lot of things that have to be, not loopholes, political hoops that have to be jumped through to make that kind of stuff happen.
Yeah.
I'm not for it generally at all, but I want to see a strong Canada and united Canada.
No, it's an awesome question, because it provokes us to think incisively about how we move our country forward. And I'll tell you this, one of the great things about Canada is it's more of a decentralized federation. And this is in contrast to the United States, where it's more centralized at the federal level. And so we have strong provinces. And those provincial premiers have an opportunity, I would challenge them, from a policy point of view, to govern as incisive conservatives that empower their citizens. So in the area of education, pursue not only those charter schools, but school vouchers, free up the economy, lower the taxes, open up trade. In this country, it's unbelievable. We don't have free trade among the provinces. Let's get our act together, folks. And as citizens, let's realize that we've got to speak up about these issues and pound it home, because we're forfeiting a lot of prosperity, all because of political crap and red tape that is bogging down our economy. It's ridiculous.
Wow. So
we need to talk about that.
Yeah, David, you just opened up my brain to so many other spots. Okay. Let's go for 3 more hours. You're here till Wednesday, right? Let's just keep going. So you're emphasizing talking to premiers. I think so often when we talk, Canadians, our concern is so often with federal. Obviously, we think about our cities and municipal, but the provinces, the premiers of the provinces, you're saying, have a lot of power that might be flying under the radar in terms of advocating.
That's the way our federation was designed, is that the way historically everything developed with the responsibilities of the British North America Act, the division of responsibilities. It's the provinces that are the strong players, and the federal government should be facilitating that exercise of authority. And that's a good model, because it's subsidiarity, that whole policy principle. You want to get power as close to the people as possible. Yes. And it's not just the provinces that should be strong, it's the local governments that should be strong. And so in this case, a lot of our problems in Canada all relate to the federal government putting its nose in the business of the provinces, saying, you can't build those pipelines and all this stuff. Like, they're constantly mucking around in the policy fields of the provincial governments. That's most of our problems these days, the last decade.
Have we experienced these problems before the last decade in previous governments? Have you noticed? Is there a cyclical effect?
We have, but it's not. The last 10 years have been at a whole different level.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have, for example, the federal government coming into play and saying, we want to try to provide school breakfast programs. No, that's the provincial government's responsibility.
Yeah.
Give me a break. But it's all because they're desperate to try to get political points with the electorate and be visible.
Virtue signal.
When they should be doing their job, like, holding border security issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, focus on the basics and get your act together on security and trade.
Yeah.
National defense is a train wreck. Let's get that together. I mean, there's so many other areas. Instead, they're inserting themselves constantly and screwing it up. And I would argue from a policy point of view.
Do you think, like, there's this theory in business about it's got a fancier name than what I'm about to say. I can't remember it, but essentially being promoted above your skill set.
Yeah,
and do you think that this happens with premiers? Is that they're not necessarily economically skilled to handle these types of issues, or even have any resources or thoughts or teams around them?
Well, it's a really good question, Jeremy. One of the concerns at Frontier we've had for years is how do we be a better resource to train up people, regardless of their background, including elected officials, on the basics of Policy 101. And just because you're elected doesn't mean you have any of that background.
I know that.
There's no reason why you would.
That's what's always so terrifying is you just, people get fired up about, there's enough problems, I'll go in and do it. And it's like, what do you have any skill set to do? What have you built? What have you done? Have you run companies? That was the one thing about, like, Trump was probably the most criticized about not being a politician. And depending on your point of view of him, that's one of his greatest skill sets, assets, is that he's not a politician.
Yeah, exactly.
He says what he says, and he's
outside the system that seems to devour anyone.
And that's the point, is that you got to be careful as an elected official that you aren't captured in a very narrow way by the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And we need good, dedicated, professional bureaucrats. There's no question about that. At the same time, you need decision makers, e.g. civilians, that are firmly in control. I'll never forget the stories of Margaret Thatcher, the great prime minister who said she required every one of her MPs and ministers in the cabinet to watch the program. What was it called again? Prime Minister. It was basically about, it was a comedy where inevitably the Minister of the Crown was always totally outmaneuvered by the bureaucrat in charge. It was quite funny. Yes, Prime Minister, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so these are lessons that we have solutions to. We've got to be able to up our game, our level of thinking. Ultimately, our level of thinking determines not only our life, but really the future of our nation. And so that's why education and critical thinking are so important, aren't they?
What would you say to the people watching this show, though? Like, in my opinion, it's talking about these types of things is almost deflating, because you're going, well, we're screwed. Like, what do we do? And what would you say to someone who's at home? Like, how can they play a part in helping change this?
There's so much we can do as citizens. It's just so multifaceted based on your skill set too. Whether you want to decide to get involved in your local school board, whether it's picking up a book like The Mosaic Effect and upping your game in terms of awareness.
Yeah.
Whether it's speaking up, writing a letter to the editor, or getting involved in an organization, helping this program. Like, gee whiz, you guys are leading the effort in some measure to encourage citizen involvement. Like, how good is that? So there's a lot we can do. It's almost mind-boggling. But I tell you this, I have seen personally, and I was an elected official, as you know, I was a mayor. I got thousands and thousands of letters and phone calls, and I tell you, I read every one of them, and they made a difference. Wow. They really were significant.
I think that's, if you even look back to the origins of where citizenship comes from, and you go back to like 6th, 7th century BC in ancient Greece, right? This idea of polis, or these individual city states where politics and rights was actually brought down to smaller communities to represent the people that were around, as opposed to one grand arching power that controlled a lot of different regions. So all my point to say, there is a lot of things that can be done on your local level, in your provincial level, right? You don't have to get caught up in the grand scheme of federal. It's important to be up to date. but get involved locally. Like you said, like start making those little changes. And if everyone made little changes, that would amount to big changes.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like, you know, one of them, oh man, there's so many. We should go through a list of 50 things, but I'll give you one example. Have a heart-to-heart with your banker, whether they're a banker or credit union, whatever they are.
Really?
And ask them about, are you only recommending, quote, environmentally, socially governance financial tools like ESG instruments? Because those things are bad news. And seriously, that is undermining Canada. There's all kinds of banks that don't even recommend investing in Canadian oil and gas. How outrageous is that?
Crazy.
I mean, this is an incredible industry. They run a great, job. And meanwhile, the country desperately needs this energy. The demand for energy has never been greater. It continues to go up in this world as China builds, another 2 coal-fired plants every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks.
They've been nonstop with how much they've been building. So talk about carbon emissions, CO2. Like you look at what how much our carbon tax is changing Canada. Well, every 2 weeks, I think China is nullifying that.
It's just crazy. So in light of that environment, why would we not be investing our funds in this industry for starters?
Yeah.
The other thing you got to look at, there's so many issues that people care about, like in education. Why wouldn't you as a parent want to know what is in the curriculum of your child? And better yet, why would you want full control of the education that your child gets with school vouchers? You get the money rather than some woke bureaucracy.
Yeah.
You know, let's demand get rid of the Indian Act. Let's free up the prosperity and opportunities for First Nations people. Why would we let people not own their home on a First Nation? How crazy is that?
That is a whole nother episode that we should get to. I would
one.
like to hear your guys' thoughts on that with the Indian Act, because that's still... You know what? It's we're going to wrap here right away, David. But I think we're at a time where Canada politically, politicians, leaders, but also citizens, we have to start looking inwardly and how do we shore up our house. We've had so much focus outwardly and this post-national state, as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, and a lot of times maybe we're looking as to what the world's doing, what the U.S. is doing good, what are these different countries doing. A lot of Canadians thinking about leaving and going. I think it's time that we focus inwardly on our house. What are the holes we have to patch? What are the holes we have to fill? And how do we make Canada great again?
Well, hey, we should be the most free, prosperous nation in the world.
That's right.
I believe we should be at a higher level in the United States, and I think we could do it if we had the right policies and leadership.
Well, Frontier Center is a great place to see some of those ideas.
That's great. Thank you.
Anything else, Jer?
The show goes on.
The show goes on, as we see right there. We'll see you guys all next week. Hey, again, one more shout out. Thank you for David for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time.